What would happen if the strongest demon king in history, a final boss no hero could defeat for 10,000 years, suddenly reincarnated into the body of a bullied high school girl who had just taken her own life? The people who pushed her to despair thought they had won. They had no idea that the girl they broke was now possessed by a monster far more terrifying than anything in their world. The story began in a parallel world. The legendary Demon King Avalon ruled as the final boss of the most difficult dungeon ever created. For 10,000 years, countless challengers tried to defeat him. Every one of them failed. Eventually, Avalon grew bored. He had conquered everything. There were no more battles worth fighting, and no opponents capable of entertaining him. Standing before the gate of ultimate reincarnation magic, he made a decision. If no one in this world could defeat him, then he would travel to another world where unknown strong warriors might exist. With that thought, Avalon cast the forbidden spell and stepped through the gate. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying on the bed of a small house in 21st century Tokyo. But something was wrong. His new body was not his own. He had reincarnated into the body of a teenage girl. The girl had died only moments earlier, which allowed Avalon to take over her empty vessel. Her name was Yamamoto Akari. As Avalon examined his new body, he noticed poison flowing through her veins. Akari had took her own life. To Avalon, the poison was trivial. He simply reached into his body with magic, gathered the toxins, and pulled them out as if removing dust. He was almost insulted. In his world, being survived catastrophic attacks, yet humans here could die from such a small amount of poison. Looking into the mirror, he saw a frail girl with overgrown bangs, pale skin, and a body weakened by stress and malnutrition. Avalon decided that if he was going to use this body, he would improve it. Using magic, he restored Akari's health and appearance. Her skin became vibrant, her posture straightened, and her hidden beauty finally emerged. The materials were excellent. They had simply been neglected. On the desk, Avalon found Akari's diary. As he read it, he learned the tragic truth. Akari had been relentlessly bullied at school. Her father had died years earlier, leaving her mother to raise her alone. She wanted to become stronger and support her mother, but no matter how hard she trained, her magical power never increased. She remained stuck at E rank, the lowest possible level. The bullying became unbearable. Feeling worthless and hopeless, Akari apologized to her mother and chose to end her life. Avalon could not fully understand human weakness, but he did understand frustration, and he respected anyone who struggled against impossible odds. Speaking to Akari's reflection, he made her a promise. Since he had taken her body, he would repay her by punishing those who drove her to despair. Then, Akari prepared for school. When her mother called out and asked about breakfast, Akari calmly replied that she did not need any. Her mother was stunned. Akari looked healthier, more confident, and completely different. When asked about the change, Akari simply smiled and said that she had changed her image. Then she added that she looked quite beautiful. Outside, Akari walked through the crowded streets of Tokyo while studying the world through her smartphone. To the ancient Demon King, the device was an incredible source of knowledge. He quickly learned about the modern world. Years earlier, mysterious gates had begun appearing across Japan. Monsters poured out from these gates and attacked humanity. To fight them, powerful individuals known as hunters emerged. These hunters were ranked according to their strength and trained at special academies. Akari herself attended one of these schools. To Avalon, the conclusion was obvious. The strongest people in this world were the hunters, and if they regularly fought monsters, then they might finally provide the challenge he had been seeking for 10,000 years. At that exact moment, fate answered him. A nearby building exploded. People screamed and ran in terror. A powerful monster had appeared in the middle of the city. Instead of fear, Akari smiled. She was delighted that this world was offering entertainment so quickly. The beast roared and charged straight at her. Elsewhere, the government's Monster Response Office went into full emergency mode. Officials reported that a rare ZB-class monster had appeared in Adachi, Tokyo. This was a disaster-level threat that normally required multiple A-rank hunters to defeat. The nearest response team would need 30 minutes to arrive. The officials could only watch helplessly and hope the civilian casualties would be minimal. Back at the scene, the battle ended almost instantly. Despite using the weak body of a teenage girl, Avalon overwhelmed the monster with ease. To him, it was only a minor test. When the dust settled, the enormous creature lay dead. The terrified civilians stared in disbelief. A single schoolgirl had defeated a monster that should have required the strongest hunters in the country. Akari adjusted her school bag and casually walked away. If this was considered powerful in this world, then perhaps she would not be bored after all. Akari headed to her Hunter Academy, a school filled with students who dedicated their lives to killing monsters. In other words, a place full of potentially strong opponents. Her eyes gleamed with excitement. She wanted these so-called hunters to entertain her. Outside the school gates, the students who had bullied Akari were already waiting. They were stunned to see her. After everything they had done, they never expected her to return. But Akari was no longer the frightened girl they once tormented. With a calm smile on her face, she walked directly toward them. As Akari walked straight toward the group that had bullied her for years, the students were immediately stunned by her transformation. One of the girls looked her up and down and said that changing her image this much seemed a little excessive. Akari remained silent, but one of the boys suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He stared at her and thought that something about this girl had completely changed. Another girl smirked and said that Akari had stayed unusually quiet. One girl reminded her that humiliating exposed photos of her had been spread all over social media, and yet she still had the nerve to come to school, as if nothing had happened. Akari recalled reading about this incident in the diary. In her previous world, the exposed bodies were displayed as symbols of terror. Compared to that, having her image exposed to the public seemed completely insignificant. Before she could respond, one of the boys grabbed her by the neck and shouted, asking if she was listening, while calling her ugly bite. At that moment, Akari remembered another part of the diary. The old Akari had always believed she was ugly. But the Demon King disagreed. The current Akari was anything but unattractive. Ever since Gates had appeared in Japan, humans who awakened magical abilities were ranked according to their power, measured in units called bites. Despite attending Hunter Academy for 2 years, Akari had remained at the very bottom of the ranking system. She was still considered the weakest of the weak. That was why she had become such an easy target. The bully sneered and said that she was not reacting the way she normally did. Then he demanded more money, reminding her that yesterday had been payday. Akari calmly asked whether he was struggling financially. The unexpected response left the bully speechless. Akari continued and said that he already owed her approximately 30,000 yen. If he wanted to borrow more money, he should first repay what he had taken. The bully's face twisted with anger. He demanded to know if she was mocking him. Akari looked at him with complete indifference. She said that if he possessed the same level of intelligence as the original Akari, he should be able to understand such simple logic. Then she added that perhaps he was not very smart. The students standing behind him burst into laughter. One of them whispered that she was definitely going to die. The bully stepped forward and furiously declared that he was Kashiwagi, the leader of the third-year students. Before he could finish his boast, Akari interrupted him. She asked whether he was threatening her. Kashiwagi proudly answered that he was. For a moment, Akari became emotional. As the final boss who had ruled the ultimate dungeon for 10,000 years, countless heroes had challenged her. For more than 5,000 years, everyone who dared threaten her had been annihilated. Never in her long existence had anyone treated her as a weak target and demanded money from her. The experience felt strangely refreshing. Tears formed in her eyes. Kashiwagi mistook those tears for fear. He smirked and asked if she was finally scared. In the next instant, Akari seized him with one hand and lifted him effortlessly into the air. The surrounding students froze in shock. Akari tightened her grip around his head and calmly said that she appreciated his courage. But he was far too weak. Kashiwagi panicked and screamed for her to let go. Without hesitation, Akari hurled him across the courtyard. His body slammed violently into a wall. The entire group stared in disbelief. One student shouted that it was impossible. An E-rank hunter should only be slightly stronger than an ordinary human. How could someone like Akari throw a person with such overwhelming force? Even more shocking, Kashiwagi stood back up. One of the girls gasped in amazement. Another student explained that Kashiwagi was a B-rank hunter. Hunter ranks ranged from E to S. Once a person reached B rank, they entered the realm of superhumans, possessing abilities far beyond normal people. Dusting himself off, Kashiwagi glared at Akari with murderous intent. He declared that he was going to kill her. Akari looked at him with a calm and almost excited smile. "By all means," she said. "Please do so." Inside the student council room, a beautiful girl sat calmly as the sounds of chaos echoed from outside. One of her subordinates knelt before her and reported that a major disturbance had broken out on school grounds. The third-year student Kashiwagi had started a fight. The girl showed little concern. She remarked that Kashiwagi was as energetic as ever, although his personality was unpleasant. Reaching the superhuman realm of B rank by his third year made him an undeniably talented hunter. She almost felt sorry for whoever had provoked him. This girl was Majima Kanan, the student body president and one of the academy's strongest students, an A-rank hunter. Outside, Kashiwagi released his magical power and charged straight at Akari. His fist came crashing down with enough force to shatter the ground beneath her feet. But Akari did not even attempt to dodge. She took the full blow head on without moving an inch. Kashiwagi laughed, convinced that victory was his. But Akari calmly asked a single question. She wanted to confirm whether he and his friends were truly the ones who had bullied this girl. The students around them gasped. Kashiwagi proudly admitted it. He boasted that he was one of the strongest students in the school, while she was one of the weakest. Then he ordered her to kneel before him, as she always had, to beg and smile at him like before. As he spoke, a magical status window appeared before him. His power surged. A nearby student was stunned by the amount of magic he was releasing. Kashiwagi selected a fire spell, and flames began swirling around his hand. The heat became so intense that the other students instinctively backed away. Akari watched the display with curiosity. The system used in this world looked different, but the magic itself was remarkably similar to the spells from her own world. Whether by coincidence or design, the principles were nearly identical. Still, she found his technique laughably inadequate. Then, with complete ease, Akari cast the exact same spell. Flame Orb, Level 1. A massive sphere of fire appeared above her palm. It was far larger and more powerful than Kashiwagi's attack. For the first time, genuine fear appeared on his face. Akari informed him that this was the weakest fire spell in her arsenal. Kashiwagi roared in frustration and hurled his fireball at her. Akari casually released her own. The two spells collided in a massive explosion that shook the entire campus. The shockwave sent students scrambling in terror. When the smoke finally cleared, a large crater had been carved into the ground. Kashiwagi was thrown inside the school, burned and completely defeated. Akari turned her gaze toward the remaining bullies. Then she asked a chilling question. Who is next? She reminded them that they still outnumbered her. Surely they had some strategy. Would they surround her and attack together? Would one of them act as a decoy while another struck at her vital organs? They trained every day to hunt monsters. So she invited them to show her the killing techniques they had spent years perfecting. The bullies were paralyzed with fear. Then they turned and ran. The sight brought back memories of her previous world, where countless heroes had fled in exactly the same way. With a snap of her fingers, Akari used magic to drag every escaping bully back to her. Then, with a single kick, she launched them all through the air. They crashed into the school building and piled on top of the unconscious Kashiwagi. In the next instant, Akari appeared before them. Her voice was calm, but her words carried overwhelming authority. She declared that she was the final boss, the Demon King. She had no desire to be a hero or champion of justice, but she intended to repay the debt she owed to the girl whose body she now possessed, and that meant delivering proper retribution. Akari stated the amount they owed. 3 million yen. The original 300,000 yen they had stolen, plus interest, multiplied tenfold as compensation for Akari's suffering. They would not receive money from their parents. They would not earn it by exploiting others. They would work for every yen through their own blood, sweat, and tears. And they had no right to refuse. Broken and trembling, every bully immediately answered yes. Akari reflected that even after reincarnating into another world, Not much has changed. Meanwhile, deep beneath the school in the mock combat room, Majima Kanan completed her morning training. Behind her lay the body of a defeated monster. One of her attendants handed her a towel and praised her hard work. Kanan smiled and said that a workout like this was barely enough to make her sweat. Just then, another student rushed into the room with urgent news. Kashiwagi, a third-year B-rank hunter, had been completely defeated. Kanan's eyes lit up with interest. She admitted that she admired young people with spirit. But Kashiwagi was still a member of her faction, and in this country, anyone who defied Majima Kanan would be taught a lesson through overwhelming force. 10,000 years ago, a mysterious sphere cracked open with the sound of a heartbeat. From that sphere, the Demon King Avalon came into existence. As Avalon opened his eyes for the first time, a figure stood before him and laughed with satisfaction. It was the god of that world. The god explained that he had created the earth, all living creatures, and every intelligent race. But his final and greatest creation was the ultimate dungeon. And at the deepest point of that dungeon, he created Avalon, the final boss. With Avalon's birth, the world was complete. But there was one final step. The god declared that Avalon must defeat him by killing the very being worshipped as absolute faith. Avalon would become the supreme existence and bring the entire world under his rule. The god attacked, but Avalon defeated his creator with ease. As he lay dying, the god smiled. Avalon asked why he looked so happy even in death. The god answered that he had fulfilled his purpose. Life does not exist to continue forever, he said. It exists to accomplish its role and then disappear, and Avalon had been born for the same reason. One day, he too would understand his true purpose. That memory faded, bringing the story back to the present. Majima Kanan studied the report about the student who had defeated Kashiwagi. When she saw the information on the screen, she assumed there had been an error. The student was Yamamoto Akari. Officially, she was still classified as E-rank. Takuchi, the student who delivered the report, assured Kanan that he had verified the data several times. There was no mistake. Kanan found it difficult to believe. In the hunter ranking system, a 1-rank difference still allowed for a possible upset. But a 2-rank difference was considered absolute. An E-rank defeating a B-rank should have been impossible. Kanan decided she would confirm the truth with her own eyes. Meanwhile, Akari walked through the school and reflected on the morning's battle. She appreciated that Kashiwagi had challenged her directly. However, fighting someone that weak had been disappointing. Since Kashiwagi was only B rank, Akari hoped to encounter an opponent at least A rank or higher. When she opened her locker, she found another cruel message. You are gross. Her indoor shoes had also been torn to pieces. Akari looked at the damage and found the prank unimaginative. After everything the original Akari had endured, she expected insults with a richer vocabulary. Without a second thought, she tossed the destroyed shoes onto the floor. A magic circle appeared beneath them. To the shock of everyone nearby, a small monster emerged and swallowed the shoes whole. Moments later, the creature spit them back out. The shoes were perfectly restored. Akari explained that the creature was a repair gremlin, a monster that fed on damaged objects. For such a creature, shredded shoes were a delicacy. She even offered to repair the shoes of the students watching. They nervously declined. As Akari walked away, she commented on how modest the students were. The witnesses stood frozen. They had never seen such strange summoning magic before, and many were only now realizing that their school had been hiding an eccentric and stunning beauty all along. Soon, an announcement echoed through the school. Yamamoto Akari was ordered to report to the faculty office. Inside, her homeroom teacher immediately began yelling. He accused her of causing a public battle in a crowded area and creating serious damage. He complained that he had been dealing with paperwork all day because of her actions. Then, he coldly reminded her that when she previously sought help about being bullied, he had dismissed it as something pathetic and told her not to increase his workload. Akari listened in silence. Then she came to a simple conclusion. This man was weak. Not just him, but every teacher in the room. None of them were stronger than Kashiwagi. When the teacher demanded to know whether she was listening, Akari calmly replied that she could not understand the value of listening to someone so incompetent. He had known a student was being bullied and had done absolutely nothing. Enraged, the teacher grabbed Akari by the collar and shouted at her. Akari glanced at his arm and remarked that it was badly trained. Then she grabbed his wrist and snapped it. The teacher screamed in agony as the other staff turned in horror. Akari looked down at him and said that a hollow vessel should learn how worthless his words truly were. Then she asked 2 questions. Why were all the instructors at this prestigious school so weak? And who was the strongest person in the academy? At that moment, Majima Kanan stepped inside. Calm and confident, she said, "I will answer both questions." The truly powerful hunters were out in the field fighting monsters. They earned far more money, fame, and influence than any teacher ever could. Those who taught at the school were simply people who lacked the strength to succeed as real hunters. And as for the strongest student in the academy, there was no need for debate. It was her. This was the first time Kanan and Akari stood face to face. Kanan addressed her by name and rank. Rank Akari. Akari studied her carefully and sensed something she had been waiting for. At last, she was standing before someone with genuine power. A small smile formed on her face. "I see," Akari said. "You are quite spirited. I dare hold some small expectations for you." Majima Kanan led Akari deep beneath the school to a massive underground arena. As Akari stepped inside, she was genuinely impressed. She remarked that it was only natural for a training institution dedicated to hunting monsters to possess such an extraordinary facility. Kanan explained that the arena was protected by multiple layers of magical barriers. There were defenses against fire, blades, blunt force, and countless other forms of destruction. The barriers were designed to withstand almost anything. That meant even an A-rank hunter like Kanan could fight without holding back. With a confident smile, Kanan said that Akari had a lot of nerve to claim she had expectations of her. Akari replied that finding someone worthy of her expectations was an exceptionally rare event in her previous world. Kanan should take pride in that. Kanan narrowed her eyes. Despite Akari's overwhelming confidence and her victory over Kashiwagi, Kanan still could not sense any significant magical power coming from her. She asked her subordinate, Kobayashi, to check Akari's official readings. Kobayashi consulted the scanner and reported that Akari's magical power was only 34 bytes, exactly what one would expect from an E-rank hunter. Akari found this strange. When she reincarnated into Yamamoto Akari's body, she assumed she had brought the magical power of her former world with her. Kashiwagi's fire magic had functioned exactly like the spells from her old world, so she believed the systems were identical. But neither the scanner nor Kanan could detect her true power. That meant the magic of this world and the magic of her previous world were fundamentally different. Even so, they felt far too similar to be unrelated. Akari decided to set that mystery aside for now. With a smile, she invited Kanan to begin. She wanted the strongest hunter in the school to display her power, and above all else, she prayed Kanan would not disappoint her like everyone else. Kanan laughed and called it an unusually passionate confession, but instead of stepping forward herself, she ordered her 2 subordinates, Kobayashi and Yoshikawa, to fight first. Akari looked at them in confusion. Kanan explained that she was the student council president and an A-rank hunter, the strongest student in the academy. There was no reason for someone of her status to battle an insignificant E-rank immediately. Besides, both of her subordinates were B-rank hunters and stronger than Kashiwagi. If Akari truly possessed unusual power, she could prove it against them. Before Kanan could finish speaking, both Kobayashi and Yoshikawa were slammed into the wall in a single instant. Kanan stared in disbelief. She had not even seen Akari move. Akari casually changed the subject. Akari explained that some people eat the strawberry on top first, while others save it for last. She enjoyed both methods. Eating it first provided immediate satisfaction. Saving it for later built anticipation. But only those who had never experienced true hunger could afford to wait for the best part. Those who were starving would seize the most delicious piece the moment it appeared. Akari's eyes gleamed with excitement. She confessed that she had been starving for 10,000 years while waiting for a worthy opponent, so she asked Kanan to present the most delicious part without delay. It was rude, she said, to keep a hungry guest waiting. For the first time, Kanan felt a chill run down her spine. Kanan finally accepted the challenge. Her folding fan transformed into a weapon, crackling with electricity. She released her full magical power and declared that the strength of an A-rank hunter would be shown to Akari in its entirety. If Akari believed she was no different from her subordinates, she was about to experience a painful lesson. Akari smiled. She said she was trembling with anticipation. A magical interface appeared before Kanan once again. Akari observed the strange window. Still intrigued by this world's unique system, Kanan selected her skill, Lightning Step. In a flash, she vanished from sight. The next instant, she appeared directly behind Akari. Her thunder baton was raised for a devastating strike. At the center of the arena, a massive sphere of electricity began to form. The story briefly shifted to provide some much-needed context about the true power of A-rank hunters. A veteran hunter named Tanaka Shizo explained just how extraordinary people like Kanan really were. According to Tanaka, when a monster gate appears, it continuously spawns creatures until the gate boss is defeated. If the gate reaches grade 3 or higher, the monsters that emerge become so powerful that even modern military forces are often helpless against them. That is where A-rank hunters come in. These elite fighters can clear such gates alone or with only a small team. In other words, an A-rank hunter possesses more destructive power than an entire armed force equipped with modern weapons. Back in the underground arena, Kanan's first strike landed directly on Akari. Akari countered by casually casting Flame Orb level 1. But Kanan used Lightning Step to dodge instantly and appear behind her. She kicked Akari into the air and struck again with devastating electrical magic. Watching from the sidelines, Kanan's subordinates were filled with admiration. They described her as fast as a flash of violet lightning and powerful enough to destroy a Terabyte-class monster with a single blow. This was the true strength of the Majima family. The House of Majima was one of the 12 distinguished families, the most powerful bloodlines in Japan. Under the leadership of Majima Junpei, an S-rank hunter and president of the Japan Hunter Association, the family had risen to dominate the nation's hunter society. Kanan herself was already an A-rank hunter, despite still being a fourth-year student. She regularly participated in large-scale operations led by the Hunter Association. She was one of the elite hunters who represented Japan. After unleashing a relentless barrage of attacks, Kanan stepped back and stared in disbelief. Akari stood before her completely unharmed. Not a scratch marked her body. Akari calmly evaluated the performance. 30 points, she said. Not bad. Kanan was deeply offended. Receiving such a low score was insulting. One of her subordinates tried to comfort her by pointing out that her score on the most recent mathematics test had been even lower. Kanan immediately shouted at him to be quiet. Akari looked at her and concluded that Kanan might not be particularly intelligent. Kanan protested. Akari dismissed the issue. She explained that intelligence was useful, but it was not the most important quality. What truly mattered was a person's character, and whether they possessed abilities that made them valuable. With those traits, even a fool could survive in society. Kanan's pride took another direct hit. Furious, she declared that she would force Akari to give her a perfect score. She attacked once more with even greater intensity. Akari accepted every strike head-on. This time, she nodded with approval. That's better. 50 points. Rather than becoming discouraged, Kanan seemed genuinely pleased. Her subordinates noted that she looked happier than she did when receiving good grades. Determined to improve further, Kanan unleashed another powerful technique, Thunderball. The electrified sphere exploded around Akari. When the smoke cleared, Akari calmly raised Kanan's score to 80 points. Kanan's eyes widened. Even after all of that, Akari remained completely unharmed. For the first time, Kanan could no longer believe that Akari was merely an E-rank student. Realizing that ordinary attacks were insufficient, Kanan prepared her ultimate technique. Her subordinates instinctively fled the arena. A massive magic circle spread across the ground. From it emerged an enormous electric dragon resembling a thunderous Ghidorah. Akari's eyes lit up with excitement. At last, this was the level of power she had been hoping to see. Good, she said. Come at me. Kanan, enraged by Akari's continued condescension, swore that she would make her regret looking down on her. With all of her pride as an A-rank hunter and a member of the mighty Majima family on the line, Kanan unleashed her strongest attack. The gigantic electric dragon crashed directly into Akari. After unleashing her most powerful attack, Majima Kanan stood in the arena, breathing heavily. She was convinced that this was the overwhelming advantage of rank. In the world of hunters, a difference of 1 rank represented an order of magnitude in power. But as the smoke slowly cleared, Akari emerged completely unharmed. Not a single scratch marked her body. Then Akari calmly announced Kanan's final score, 105 points. Kanan stared at her in disbelief. She demanded to know what that score even meant. Akari had taken absolutely no damage, so perhaps the score was out of 1,000. Akari instantly appeared before her and grabbed her hand. Then she corrected her. Wrong. Full marks is 1 billion points. Compared to the average person, Akari admitted that Kanan was somewhat impressive. Her determination was admirable, and it was obvious that she spent every day striving to improve herself. For that reason, Akari awarded her an additional 6 points. Before Kanan could process those words, she activated Lightning Step and retreated, but Akari caught up to her in an instant. Raising a finger, Akari prepared to flick Kanan's forehead. Kanan instinctively blocked. The impact was so powerful that she was launched into the wall, and her weapon shattered on the spot. Akari then began to explain Kanan's weaknesses. The first problem was her magical construction. Her understanding of magic was too crude. To create even a tiny amount of electricity, one had to imagine countless details, including color, shape, structure, and the interactions of matter at the smallest possible level. True mastery required visualizing the world down to its most fundamental particles. Kanan, by contrast, only shaped her energy into rough attacks. The second flaw was even more serious. Deep in her heart, Kanan had already accepted that there were opponents she could never defeat. Whatever trauma she carried, it had caused her spirit to stagnate, and because magic was directly connected to the soul, her fear had limited her growth. Kanan was shaken. Everything she believed about the hunter ranking system was collapsing before her eyes. When she first heard that an E-rank student had defeated Kashiwagi, she assumed there had been some kind of mistake. Then she suspected that Akari possessed a hidden special ability, but now she realized the truth. Akari was not simply stronger. She was a fundamentally different existence. As Kanan struggled to understand, memories from 10 years earlier resurfaced. As a child, she had proudly announced to her parents that she had become an A-rank hunter. Her father praised her with pride. Her mother told her that she was already extraordinary. Her father reminded her that the Majima family had supported Japan for generations. As hunters, they carried the responsibility and pride of protecting the nation. But that happy memory was followed by a darker one. Both of her parents were murdered. The killer mocked everything they believed in. He told Kanan that talk of pride and duty was meaningless. In this world, he said, there were only the strong and the weak. Back in the present, Akari ordered Kanan to stand. Akari declared that strength itself was the reason Kanan had to rise again. Only by refusing to accept inevitable defeat could she open the door to new possibilities. Kanan trembled. Akari assumed she would remain broken, just like the countless challengers who had despaired before the Demon King in her former world. She silently cursed the god who had created her. If he had gone to the trouble of giving her life, he could at least have created opponents worthy of her. Then, to Akari's surprise, Kanan shouted and forced herself to her feet. Akari asked why she continued. Kanan answered with conviction, because there was something she absolutely had to carry through. With that, Kanan charged forward one final time. Akari's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. This was exactly the reason she had crossed worlds. Kanan grabbed Akari by the face and unleashed every ounce of electrical power she possessed. The arena erupted in a blinding surge of lightning, but when the light faded, Kanan dropped to her knees. Akari remained standing, completely unaffected. Akari told her to take pride. That had been the strongest attack she had delivered that day. Then Akari raised her hand and cast a spell of her own. Lightning Shock, Level 3. A massive explosion of electricity tore through the arena, shattering the ground and opening a huge crater beneath them. As she turned away, Akari gave Kanan her final verdict. She was still inexperienced, but Akari had great expectations for her. After Akari and Majima Kanan's battle shook the underground arena, students throughout the school began wondering what had caused the massive explosion beneath the campus. But one student paid little attention to the commotion. His name was Tanaka Manabu, a second-year student in Class 2, the same class as Akari. Manabu was the top student in his year and one of the few second years to achieve C rank. In the world of hunters, Rank was determined primarily by the amount of magical power a person possessed by the age of 7. Although training could improve one's rank, advancement became increasingly difficult at higher levels. In fact, no one had ever reached S rank without being born with extraordinary talent. Manabu himself had started as an E rank and worked his way up 2 full ranks, an impressive accomplishment. That was enough for a comfortable life. However, the people who truly enjoyed wealth, influence, and status were A-rank hunters and above. Manabu's dream was to secure a prestigious position in the Hunter Association or the government. Both careers required a minimum of C rank, and he was confident that through steady effort, he could achieve his goal. There was one unresolved issue weighing on his mind. Yamamoto Akari, the girl who sat next to him. He had never been romantically interested in her, but he knew she was being bullied, and he chose to do nothing. He convinced himself that the situation was none of his business. Intervening might damage his spotless record and jeopardize his future. When Akari stopped coming to school, he told himself that perhaps it was for the best. She was weaker than anyone else, yet she studied harder and trained more seriously than almost anyone in the class. As class representative, and someone who wanted to serve society in the future, Manabu began to wonder whether abandoning someone like her had really been the right choice. But he believed it was too late for regrets. After all, Akari was gone, or so he thought. The classroom door suddenly opened. Akari walked in. Manabu stared at her in disbelief. The timid and exhausted girl he once knew had been replaced by a stunning beauty radiating confidence. Manabu was so shocked by her transformation that he barely recognized her. He asked if she was really Akari. She confirmed that she was, though her unusual manner of speaking made him wonder what had happened to her. Akari leaned closer and proudly pointed to her face, declaring that this was what it meant for raw material to shine once properly polished. At that moment, 2 girls entered the classroom, Imai and Kitamura. These were 2 of Akari's most vicious bullies. Thanks to their influential family backgrounds, they had always acted without fear of consequences. They immediately grabbed Akari by the head and began taunting her. This time, Manabu decided to intervene. Before he could act, Akari calmly seized one of the girls by the wrist. The expression on her face was so serious that both girls froze in terror. Akari insulted them with absolute contempt. Then she struck the desk with a single blow. The table split cleanly in half. The 2 girls were so overwhelmed by fear that they collapsed unconscious on the spot. Akari looked down at them and asked whether she should sterilize the filth. Manabu stood in stunned silence. He could not comprehend the overwhelming strength and confidence of the girl sitting beside him. Akari then turned to him and asked if he had been trying to help her. Manabu admitted that he had. Akari praised his courage. She said that even the weak could shine brilliantly if they possessed the will to overcome fear. Manabu understood almost none of what she was saying, but he did understand one thing. He regretted not standing by Akari sooner. If he had defended her earlier, perhaps things would have turned out differently. Akari agreed. Had he acted sooner, the future might indeed have changed. Their conversation was interrupted when a substitute teacher entered the classroom. Their homeroom teacher, she explained, had been taken away by ambulance for unknown reasons. As she spoke, she noticed Imai and Kitamura unconscious on the floor and rushed to help them. At that moment, Akari spotted a flyer announcing upcoming gate practical training. Curious, she searched for more information on her smartphone. She quickly learned that the gates contained monsters far stronger than the ones found outside. Akari's eyes lit up with excitement. At last, she had found a place where truly powerful enemies might exist. Without hesitation, she decided to participate. Beyond those gates, she might finally encounter monsters strong enough to exceed even her own expectations. As Akari researched gate practical training on her smartphone, she learned that groups of 5 students, ranging from 2nd year to 5th year, entered real monster gates under the supervision of a teacher. This was one of the most important parts of Hunter Academy's curriculum. Students who completed this training had a significantly higher survival rate after graduation and were considered far more valuable than ordinary hunters. While she was reading, a familiar voice called out. Majima Kanan had found her. Akari looked up and immediately referred to her by the score she had given her during their battle. Kanan quickly corrected her. Her name was Majima Kanan. She then noticed Akari staring at her phone and asked what she was doing. Akari casually explained that she had discovered Twitter. Since the previous day, she had been posting blunt truths online and watching people react with outrage and confusion. To Akari, provoking strangers on social media was surprisingly entertaining. Kanan could only think that Akari was exactly the type of person who would thrive on social media chaos. Kanan then made an extraordinary request. She told Akari that she was granting her the privilege of training her. Akari, however, paid almost no attention. She was too busy composing another post criticizing young people who blamed society for their own failures. Kanan was left speechless as Akari walked away without giving a proper response. Soon, the instructor Ikimura gathered the students and introduced himself as the supervisor for the gate training. Akari politely said that she looked forward to working with him and added that she hoped to encounter a monster capable of causing a natural disaster. Ikimura was alarmed by her comment and wondered why this second-year student was so frighteningly confident. He also asked why she was not wearing armor. Akari calmly replied that there was no reason to intentionally make herself easier to defeat. Before the instructor could process that statement, a fifth-year student approached. His name was Gotu, a B-rank hunter. Recognizing Akari as the famous E-rank student who had suddenly become the talk of the school, he was immediately captivated by her appearance. With a smug grin, he declared that if she followed him, he would personally protect her. He boasted that although Ichimura was the official supervisor, his own rank was higher, making him the true leader of the group. He even suggested that Akari spend some private time with him after the training. Another student, Sasagawa, a D-rank hunter, joined in and praised Gotu's generosity. Before the situation could escalate, Majima Kanan stepped forward. She proposed rearranging the groups so that she and Akari would be placed together. Gotu initially objected, but the moment Kanan released a small amount of her overwhelming magical power, all resistance disappeared. Even Sasagawa admitted that defying a member of the Majima family was a terrible idea. With the issue settled, the students prepared to enter the gate. Just before stepping through, Kanan told Akari that they were now in the same party. Akari observed that Kanan was pursuing her with unusual persistence. Kanan replied with complete seriousness. There was someone she absolutely had to defeat. Akari studied her determined expression and smiled. Those were the eyes of someone with genuine resolve. For the first time, Akari began to wonder what it would mean to raise an opponent capable of surpassing her. Meanwhile, elsewhere in another dungeon, a far more dangerous situation was unfolding. An elite raid team stood before a powerful gate. Leading them was Kawakami Kenjin, an A-rank hunter and captain of the Viking Gold Guild. Their target was a terrifying monster known as Gaon of Pleasure. 2 days earlier, this creature had slaughtered 20 hunters, including 3 A-rank fighters. The only survivor reported that the monster smiled as it killed. Kenjin explained that some dungeon bosses possessed emotions and intelligence. Certain monsters could even cooperate with humans, but Gaon was different. Its emotions were clearly malicious. Kenjin estimated that the creature was at least ZB class, possibly even stronger. As the raid team entered the dungeon, they prepared to trap the monster with a magical barrier. But the moment they stepped inside, they were met with a horrifying sight. The floor was covered with the corpses of dead hunters. Then one of the team members pointed to a strange black orb floating nearby. It was a connection hole, a dimensional passage linking one dungeon to another. Before they could stop it, the portal vanished. Kenjin immediately understood the danger. Connection holes often linked to nearby gates, and the closest gate in the area was the one currently being used by students from Hunter Academy. Inside the gate, instructor Ikimura warned the students that this dungeon was a danger-type map, which meant traps could appear at any moment. Everyone needed to stay alert, but fifth-year student Gotu was barely paying attention. For 4 years, he had lived under the authority of older students. Now that he was a senior and a B-rank hunter, he believed it was finally his turn to command others. Since instructor Ikimura was ranked lower than him, Gotu convinced himself that he was the true leader of the group. In his mind, he was a god. Unfortunately for him, reality was far less satisfying. Majima Kanan effortlessly defeated every monster they encountered, leaving Gotu with nothing to do. Watching her only made him more frustrated. Even though Kanan was younger than him, she was an A-rank hunter, the student council president, and a member of the powerful Majima family. The gap between them was enormous. At one point, Gotu deliberately bumped into Kanan. While pretending to apologize, he secretly stole her student council badge and handbook. Meanwhile, Akari observed that the monsters inside the training gate were disappointingly weak. Kanan explained that training gates were intentionally maintained at low difficulty, allowing stronger monsters to appear would be too dangerous and too costly. Akari sighed in disappointment. That meant there was little chance of encountering a creature powerful enough to tear her body apart. Later, the group arrived at a safe area and stopped to rest. Akari asked instructor Ikimura whether there was any possibility that a monster strong enough to destroy an entire country might suddenly appear. The instructor had no idea how to respond. At the same time, Kanan realized her student council badge and handbook were missing. When she spotted them lying on the ground nearby, she walked over to retrieve them. There, Goto had planted a sign that read, "This way for stupid blonde girls." Furious, Kanan rushed in the direction indicated by the sign. The moment she stepped forward, she triggered a trap. A barrier slammed shut behind her, sealing her off from the rest of the group. Kanan shouted in frustration as she realized she had been tricked. Watching from a distance, Goto smirked with satisfaction. He had heard rumors that Kanan was not particularly intelligent, and he was delighted to see how easily she had fallen into his trap. Back at the resting area, Ichimura announced that it was time to continue exploring. Akari was asking another student whether they knew anyone truly strong. Then Ikimura noticed that Kanan was missing. Goto immediately lied. He claimed that Kanan had been caught in one of the dungeon's division traps, but would certainly escape on her own. He insisted that the group should move forward without her. Ikimura objected and argued that they should help, but Goto lost his temper and punched the instructor. He declared that with Kanan gone, he was now the highest-ranked member and therefore the leader. The younger student were too intimidated to argue. Inside, Goto reveled in the feeling of controlling others. This was the authority he had dreamed about for years. When a student pointed out that they were moving away from the official training route, Goto dismissed the concern. He had no interest in repeating the same safe exploration he had completed many times before. His true objective was the gate boss. Even weak gates produced magic stones worth a considerable amount of money, and Goto intended to keep all the rewards for himself. Ikimura protested that training gates were carefully preserved so future students could continue using them, but Akari focused on only one thing, the gate boss. If it was stronger than the ordinary monsters they had encountered, then perhaps this training would not be a waste of time after all. Goto proudly confirmed that the boss was much stronger. He led the group through a cave toward the boss chamber. In his mind, everything was proceeding perfectly. According to the information he had gathered, the gate boss was a GB class monster known as the Blue Grizzly. It was strong, but still well within the capabilities of a B rank hunter. More importantly, it was weak to fire magic. Goto had prepared specifically for this battle. The magic stone and the glory of defeating the boss would belong to him alone. But the moment they entered the chamber, the Blue Grizzly was cut cleanly in half. Goto stopped in shock. Standing behind the dead boss was another creature, a monster that did not belong in this gate. It had entered through the connection hole from another dungeon. The smiling beast, known as Gaon of Pleasure, had arrived, and as it gazed upon the terrified students, it began to laugh. On the other side of the cave, Majima Kanan continued fighting her way through the division trap. These traps were among the deadliest dangers inside dungeons. Once activated, the victim was sealed inside and forced to battle an endless stream of monsters. The exit would only reopen after every creature had been defeated. More than 40 hunters died to these traps every year in Japan, but Kanan was not an ordinary hunter. One after another, she destroyed every monster that stood in her path. Even while exhausted, she declared that enemies of this level were no match for Majima Kanan. At the same time, the rest of the students faced a far more terrifying threat. The invading monster stood over the corpse of the Blue Grizzly. Goto stared in disbelief. This creature had never been mentioned in the gate's information, and even though the original boss was dead, the dungeon had not disappeared. Instructor Ikimura quickly explained what had happened. When a boss monster was killed by another monster, the new creature inherited the role of gate boss. This rare phenomenon was known as a pole shift. The monster slowly turned its gaze toward the students. Goto tried to reassure himself. As a B-rank hunter, he could defeat most gate bosses, but before he could even react, the monster sliced off his arm in a single strike. Goto screamed in agony. He had not even seen the attack. His armor had been cut through effortlessly. The speed and power were beyond anything he had ever experienced. The monster smiled. Instructor Ikimura recognized it immediately. This was Gaon of Pleasure. Only 3 days earlier, it had annihilated an A-rank party and earned a name as one of the most dangerous monsters in the region. No one could understand why such a creature had appeared in a student training gate. Goto's panic turned to desperation. First, he had been overshadowed by Kanan, and now this monster had appeared to ruin everything. He looked around at the others. The instructor and third-year students were only C rank. The second years were even weaker. In his eyes, they were expendable. As Gaon approached, Goto realized he was about to die. In a final act of selfishness, he shouted that as leader, he was ordering everyone else to serve as decoys while he escaped. When a student protested, Goto stabbed her in the leg. He screamed that anyone who disobeyed him would be killed, but before he could say anything else, Gaon struck from behind. In one clean motion, the monster split Goto in half. The student erupted into panic. Ikimura felt a crushing sense of despair. Even escaping seemed impossible. There was nothing he could do. Then Akari stepped forward. She looked genuinely intrigued. She remarked that the situation had become quite interesting. She announced that in accordance with their deceased leader's final order, she would act as the decoy. Ikimura desperately told her not to go. He refused to sacrifice one of his students. Akari dismissed his concern. As Gaon lunged toward her, she delivered a single kick that sent the enormous monster flying backward. Akari observed that if such a blow had not shattered its head, then it was a surprisingly sturdy creature. Enraged, Gaon attacked again. This time, Akari caught its massive axe with her bare hand. A delighted smile spread across her face. Finally, she had found a worthy opponent. She cast Flame Orb level 1 and struck the monster. Gaon survived. Though badly injured, Akari's excitement only grew. This creature was stronger than any monster she had encountered since arriving in this world. Because of that, she decided to raise the stakes. She activated Flame Orb level 4. The spell created 32 flame orbs at once. Akari invited Gaon to show her whether it could endure such an attack. For the first time, the monster hesitated, but it still charged forward. The fireballs struck one after another, battering Gaon relentlessly until it collapsed in ruins. Akari admitted that the battle had been enjoyable. Still, she felt disappointed that monsters lacked the ability to grow stronger during combat. Just as she prepared to finish Gaon, she suddenly stopped. A new idea had occurred to her. Elsewhere, Majima Kanan finally emerged from the division trap. She was exhausted after fighting countless monsters and making her way back to the group. As she walked through the dark corridor, a massive figure stepped out from the shadows. Kanan froze. Standing before her was Gaon of Pleasure. Then Akari appeared behind the creature. She reminded Kanan that she had asked to be trained. Akari agreed to take her on as a student, but only under 2 conditions. The first condition was simple. Kanan had to defeat the monster standing before her. Kanan stared at Akari in disbelief. She had just survived a deadly trap and was completely exhausted, and now Akari expected her to defeat the same monster that had slaughtered elite hunters. Majima Kanan's brutal training began immediately. The moment the battle started, Gaon of Pleasure swung its massive weapon with overwhelming force. Kanan activated Lightning Step and barely avoided the attack. Even so, she was stunned by the monster's terrifying strength. Still, she remained confident. If the attack could not hit her, then its power meant nothing. Kanan counterattacked with her lightning techniques, but Gaon moved with shocking speed. In the next instant, the monster appeared behind her and kicked her so hard that she crashed into the cavern wall. Khan gritted her teeth in disbelief. Its speed matched her own. This confirmed what she had feared. Gaon was unquestionably a ZB-class disaster monster, a creature so powerful that it normally required several A-rank hunters to defeat. Akari watched the battle and asked if Kanan was ready to give up. She reminded her that the monster was far stronger than she was. Kanan acknowledged the truth. Only an S-rank hunter could likely defeat Gaon alone. But that was exactly why she had to overcome it. If she wanted revenge on the person she was pursuing, she needed the strength to defeat monsters like this by herself. Akari smiled with satisfaction. This was the determination she wanted to see. Kanan unleashed her ultimate spell once more. Summoning the electric dragon Ghidorah, the attack blasted Gaon backward and inflicted significant damage. But even after taking the full force of her strongest technique, the monster stood up again. Kanan clenched her fists. The problem was not her technique, it was her output. The limitations of her rank restricted both her magical power and the destructive force she could produce. For a moment, she wondered whether she simply had not been born with absolute strength. Akari then offered a final piece of advice. When casting magic, everything depended on imagination. To create electricity properly, one had to visualize color, shape, structure, and the countless interactions that governed the natural world. As Kanan reflected on those words, she realized how narrow her thinking had been. Until now, she had relied entirely on selecting pre-existing spells from the status window. That method was efficient, but it also limited her creativity. Magic was not confined to preset skills. If she truly understood the principles behind it, she could create entirely new techniques. At that moment, Kanan remembered something one of her teachers had once explained. Electricity could generate magnetism. Looking around the dungeon, she noticed the abundance of minerals embedded in the walls and floor. An idea flashed through her mind. Using her electrical power, she magnetized the surrounding stones and sent them floating into the air. Gayan turned toward the barrage of rocks, but Kanan had already vanished. Appearing behind the monster, she condensed her lightning into a tiny pebble. Her raw power might not be enough to incinerate Gayan, but if she concentrated all of that energy into a single point, she could pierce it. With perfect precision, Kanan launched the electrified projectile. The stone shot forward like a railgun and tore straight through Gayan's skull. The monster collapsed. For the first time, Kanan had defeated a disaster-class monster entirely through her own ingenuity. Akari watched with genuine approval. She praised Kanan for fighting to the very end without surrendering, even against an opponent far stronger than herself. There were not many people in any world capable of such determination. Kanan accepted the compliment with pride, but Akari then asked an important question. Was the person Kanan sought revenge against truly someone worth going this far for? After all, by this world's standards, A-rank hunters were already among the strongest beings alive. Kanan answered quietly, yes, but the man she wanted to defeat existed in an entirely different realm. The story then shifted to explain the enormous influence of the Hunter Association. Without the association, modern civilization would collapse. If gates were left unattended, monsters would overrun the country and destroy normal life. The magic stones harvested from dungeons had also become one of the world's cleanest and most efficient energy sources, powering both cities and advanced technology. More than 95% of all hunters operated under the Hunter Association. Inside the association's headquarters, an employee knocked on a door. She announced that Mike Zachburn, the CEO of Frankbook, had arrived for a meeting. A man's screams echoed through the room. The mysterious man casually explained that if one extracted the pain nerves and ran electricity through them, the victim would cry out in fascinating ways. The visiting CEO stood frozen in terror. Then the man remarked that the noise was too loud for conversation. Without hesitation, he crushed the victim's head with his bare hand. The room fell silent. When the CEO asked whether the victim had been a subordinate who made a mistake, the man shrugged. It was nothing personal. He simply selected random people and killed them to pass the time. For others, hobbies might include taking walks or going camping. This was his. Finally, he turned toward his guest and asked what sort of flattery the chairman had come to offer. This monstrous figure was none other than Majima Junpei, NS rank hunter, president of the Japan Hunter Association. Elsewhere in Japan, a young woman dressed in an elegant kimono sat watching news reports about recent monster incidents. A servant approached and presented her with footage of every battle involving monsters classified as ZB class or higher. Among those recordings was the incident at Hunter School, where the disaster monster Gayan of Pleasure had invaded the student training gate. The servant explained that the footage had been captured by the body camera of instructor Ikimura. According to the official records, Gayan had been defeated by the A-rank hunter Majima Kanan, but after watching the video carefully, the young woman immediately reached a different conclusion. She had found the person she had been searching for. In the aftermath of the incident, Goto's funeral was held quietly with only his immediate family in attendance. At Hunter School, deaths during training occurred every few years, and because Goto's recklessness was the direct cause of the tragedy, the school issued no formal apology. Among hunters, risking one's life and dying in battle was considered an accepted part of the profession. Akari attended a classroom lesson and found the experience surprisingly enjoyable. She explained that being locked in a small room with many people, forbidden to speak or even stand without permission, reminded her of being captured, stripped of her freedom, and turned into a slave. To Akari, it was an oddly refreshing experience. Majima Kanan said, now that she had successfully completed Akari's first condition, Kanan reminded her of the promise to train her. Akari assured her that she intended to keep her word, but she had forgotten to mention the second condition. Kanan asked what it was. Akari answered without hesitation, when you become strong enough, kill me with your own power. Kanan was left speechless. Before she could respond, a luxurious car arrived and stopped in front of them. A servant of kimono lady stepped out and asked if she was Yamamoto Akari. Akari confirmed her identity. Kanan noticed the 3 maple leaf crest on the man's clothing and immediately recognized it. He belonged to the Reizei family, once the most powerful of the 12 noble families. The Reizei house had been surpassed in recent years by the rising Majima family. The man explained that the head of the Reizei family wished to meet Akari. At first, Akari saw no reason to go, but when the messenger mentioned that his family knew she was searching for a strong opponent, Akari's interest was instantly captured. The man then turned to Kanan and said that the family head would also like to speak with her. Soon, Akari and Kanan arrived at the Reizei estate. Akari observed that the residence was remarkably traditional and lacked the flashy atmosphere she associated with. Kanan immediately protested, insisting that the Majima family was also an ancient and distinguished house. After walking through the enormous estate, they were led to a sliding door. Inside sat Reizei Shion. To Akari's surprise, the head of one of the oldest and most prestigious families in Japan was a 17-year-old girl. Shion explained that both of her parents had died 5 years earlier, forcing her to assume leadership at a very young age. She then addressed the real reason for the meeting. Shion admitted that she had secretly reviewed the footage of the battle against Gaian of Pleasure. Although the official report credited Kanan with the victory, it was obvious from the video that Akari possessed the power to kill the monster instantly. Then Shion asked a startling question. Was Akari truly a human from this world? Kanan was shocked by the suggestion. Akari, however, calmly asked Shion why she believed that. Shion explained that Akari's strength existed on an entirely different level. At the same time, her measurable magical power was absurdly low. The numbers shown by the system were clearly meaningless. Akari decided there was no reason to hide the truth. She openly revealed that she was a reincarnated being. In her previous life, she had been the Demon King and final boss of the ultimate dungeon in another world. Kanan struggled to believe what she was hearing, but Shion accepted the explanation immediately. The gates already connected to other worlds, so the appearance of someone from another world was entirely plausible. It also explained why Akari's true magical power could not be measured by the systems of this world. Akari was impressed by how quickly the supposedly rigid and ancient Reizei family adapted to the truth. She even remarked that a certain useless blonde should learn from Shion's intelligence. Kanan immediately demanded to know who Akari was referring to. Ignoring the comment, Shion continued. When she first saw Akari fight, she sensed that Akari was searching for a worthy opponent. Now she was certain. Then Shion posed the question that changed everything. Did Akari want to battle the strongest monster in this world? Shion explained that many people believed the modern world had become something like a game. Monsters emerged from gates. Certain humans awakened magical powers. Skills were activated through status windows. All of these phenomena suggested that someone had intentionally designed this system. Akari quietly agreed that such a possibility seemed likely. Shion then revealed that if this world truly functioned like a game, there must also be a final stage. Only the Hunter Association and a select few influential figures from each nation knew of its existence. The final quest, known as the Descent of White, was the most difficult quest in existence. It could only be activated by gathering every key and bringing them together in one place. Once this final quest was completed, all gates across the world would disappear forever. Akari immediately understood the significance. This was the true clear condition of the world. Shion continued. At the deepest point of the Descent of White waited the ultimate and strongest boss monster. The moment Akari heard those words, her heart began to race with excitement. This world contained a final boss greater than anything else. She smiles. Shion explained her true goal. Ever since the gates appeared, the world had descended into chaos. Although magic stones had become a crucial energy source, the destruction caused by monsters was far greater. The Hunter Association had become so powerful that not even national governments could control it. Shion wanted to restore the world to what it had once been, a peaceful place where ordinary people could live without fear. Then the 17-year-old family head bowed deeply before Akari. She asked the Demon King to lend her strength. Akari admitted that she had little interest in the political future of this world, but the prospect of facing the strongest boss monster imaginable thrilled her. She agreed immediately. Then she asked the obvious question. Should she begin searching for the keys? Shion revealed that she already knew where they were. Kanan confirmed this. As the daughter of the Majima family, she had access to confidential information that most people would never learn. The keys was held by the Japanese branch of the Hunter Association, and it was currently in the possession of Majima Junpei, Kanan's older brother. Akari turned toward her student. The person Kanan wanted revenge on was none other than her own brother. Kanan remained silent, but her expression said everything. Akari quickly summarized the situation in her own blunt way. In other words, she needed to defeat Majima Junpei and take the key from him. Still, one question remained. Akari asked Xian why she did not simply challenge Junpei herself. After all, Xian seemed exceptionally strong. Xian shook her head. Although she was powerful, she was nowhere near strong enough. Akari then asked Kanan whether her brother was truly that strong. Kanan answered without hesitation. Majima Junpei was the strongest S-rank hunter in Japan. As director of the Japan Hunter Association, he abused his authority to increase defense contracts and enrich himself. Worse still, he kidnapped random people from the streets, tortured them, and murdered them for entertainment. Xian added that many influential figures knew the truth, but no one could stop him. His existence was a brutal reminder of the world's most primitive law. In the end, everything came down to physical power. Society, religion, politics, and tradition meant little when one individual possessed overwhelming strength. And that was exactly what an S-rank hunter represented. Only an even greater power could oppose him. That was why Akari, the demon king from another world, was their only hope. After hearing everything, Akari smiled. This arrangement was perfect. Kanan's older brother, the strongest hunter in Japan, and the ultimate boss of the Descent of White, all sounded extremely interesting. She agreed to cooperate. Xian thanked her and explained that the Reizi family was secretly working with the police and prosecutors to place Majima Junpei into legal custody. Until then, they needed to wait. On the ride home, Akari asked Kanan if she was truly comfortable with this plan. After all, Akari might end up defeating her brother before Kanan had the chance. Kanan replied that she would be satisfied even if someone else brought him down. Of course, she still hoped to defeat him with her own hands, and until the operation began, she had no intention of giving up. Akari was pleased by her determination. Then she asked Kanan to prepare a reasonably difficult gate for the next day, not for ordinary training, but for something far more intense. Kanan assured her that using the influence of the Majima family, arranging such a gate would be simple. Akari smiled and warned her to prepare for a truly thorough training session. The next day, Akari arrived at the designated gate. To her surprise, a group of students was already waiting. The moment they saw her, they bowed in unison and greeted her respectfully. "Good morning, Boss Akari." Akari looked at the crowd and thought to herself that the number of students following her seemed to be increasing. The sight immediately annoyed her. Kanan explained that when she mentioned Akari was going to train her, several students insisted on joining as well. One of the boys stepped forward and said they had been deeply impressed by Akari's overwhelming strength during the recent battle. Another student added that they wanted to become as powerful as she was. A girl bowed and begged Akari to accept them as her students. Soon the entire group lowered their heads and addressed her as Boss Akari. Akari looked at them coldly. Not long ago, many of these same students had tormented the original Akari. They had spread humiliating photos online and pushed her to the point of taking her own life. One student asked, "What do you mean by that? You are still alive." Akari casually suggested, "You're so clever. Let's turn your head into a soccer ball." The boy immediately apologized. After a brief silence, Akari made her decision. She had already repaid the debt she owed to the original owner of this body, and if her goal was to cultivate opponents capable of defeating her, then having more students to train would only increase her chances. She agreed to accept them, but there was one condition. They must never use the power they gain to harm anyone weaker than themselves. The students eagerly promised. One of the boys even swore that he would abandon his bad habits from now on. Satisfied, Akari prepared to begin. Kanan commented that Akari was surprisingly kind-hearted. Akari immediately snapped back, calling her an incompetent blonde and a fake nouveau riche. Kanan protested at the harsh insult, but Akari ignored her and ordered everyone to move out. The group entered a third-grade, jungle-type gate. Kanan explained that the dungeon had approximately 3 weeks remaining before overflow, the point when monsters would spill into the real world. This was a difficult gate that an A-rank hunter could clear alone, but anything more dangerous would require multiple A-rank hunters. With Kashiwagi and the other students present as support, the challenge should be manageable. Akari nodded and told everyone that the current level was sufficient. Their objective was simple. They were to complete the quest. As they advanced through the jungle, monsters attacked from every direction. Kanan immediately entered the battle, and the students followed her lead. One of the boys instructed the others not to focus on defeating every monster. Instead, they only needed to survive long enough for Kanan to demonstrate her strength and allow them to use their own abilities effectively. The students worked together surprisingly well. They coordinated their attacks, protected one another, and maintained a disciplined formation. Akari observed from the rear, carefully watching how they handled themselves. After a long struggle, the monsters were finally defeated. Kanan asked whether anyone had been injured. One of the girls admitted that she had suffered a minor wound, and Kanan handed her a recovery potion. Akari was genuinely impressed. The group cooperated far better than she expected. One of the boys bowed proudly, thanking her for the praise. Kanan explained that the students had already gained considerable experience exploring gates under her leadership. Soon, they reached the boss chamber. A student excitedly suggested defeating the boss immediately, but Akari stepped forward. There was no need to kill the gate boss. The purpose of this expedition was to test and improve their abilities. Destroying the boss would only cause the valuable training environment to disappear. Instead, Akari led them deeper into the jungle. When they reached a secluded area, Kanan asked what she intended to do. Akari explained that the most efficient way to grow stronger was to fight opponents slightly above one's current level. Kanan agreed with her reasoning. However, before the real training could begin, Akari needed to remove the surrounding monsters. A dark and overwhelming aura erupted from her body. The sheer pressure spread throughout the jungle. Every monster in the gate sensed it. Akari ordered them to get lost. They fled in terror. When she turned back, she discovered that all of her new students had collapsed unconscious from fear. Without concern, she stepped on one of the boys and told them to wake up and show more spirit. Kanan pointed out that there were no monsters left to fight. Akari smirked. There was no need to rush. She was about to summon their opponents herself. A massive magic circle appeared, marked with a glowing star. From within the circle, numerous monsters began emerging one after another. The students stared in horror as they found themselves completely surrounded. Akari looked at them with a satisfied smile. Then she gave the order. Now, their real training would begin. Meanwhile, in Hunter Association building, Majima Junpei sat eating while one of his managers stood nearby. Junpei asked for her thoughts. In ancient times, before laws existed, humans had likely eaten one another. Junpei smiled. When he ate meat, he enjoyed imagining that he was trampling on the life of the creature that had been slaughtered to create the meal. That thought made the food taste even better, and if crushing the life of an animal felt so satisfying, then crushing a human life was even more pleasurable. The manager then reported that there was one matter he needed to know. The government and the police had begun exhibiting unusual behavior. Upon hearing this, Majima Junpei slowly smiled. Back in the gate, one of Akari's students screamed that he was definitely going to die. Akari, sitting calmly on a tree branch above the battlefield, called out to him using the wrong name as usual. She told him that it was already the 10th day of training, and ordered him to clear his mind and face the challenge. He desperately corrected her, reminding her that she had forced him to fight monsters stronger than himself every single day. He shouted that he had nearly died more times than he could count. Akari simply laughed. If he truly seemed about to die, she promised that she would step in. He protested that she had said the same thing many times before, while watching an airplane pass through the peaceful sky visible from within the gate. Akari reflected on how tranquil this world was. Compared to her old world, even the skies felt gentle. When the boy tripped and accidentally avoided the monster attack, he turned to Akari and complained that she was not taking his struggle seriously. Akari apologized only half-heartedly. Then she explained an important lesson. The process of becoming stronger was inseparable from the risk of death. If one wished to survive, they had to use every ounce of intelligence and strength to figure out how to defeat their opponent. Many people claimed that studying and training were the keys to growth. But in Akari's eyes, real progress could only be achieved through actual combat. As she observed her students battling across the jungle, Akari thought to herself that 10 days had passed since the beginning of her special training. Every member of the group was steadily improving. To her surprise, she seemed to possess a genuine talent for leadership. She even wondered whether she should have started training followers much earlier. Nearby, Majima Kanan continued her own battle. Using her evolving lightning abilities, she created replica versions of herself to confuse her opponent. The monster crushed the clones, only for the real Kanan to appear from behind and deliver the finishing blow. Akari watched with satisfaction. Kanan's rate of growth exceeded all expectations. By overcoming her fear of stronger opponents, she appeared to have removed the psychological limits that had held her back for years. Even so, Akari believed Kanan still had a long way to go. With a smile, she remarked that the blonde girl was raising her expectations. After the battle, the exhausted students collapsed to the ground. Some said they thought they were going to die. Others admitted they could not move another step. Akari then asked one of them a blunt question. Why had he resorted to extorting money from her? Could he not have earned money honestly instead? Kanan answered on his behalf. The Hunter Association held an almost complete monopoly over gate management and the rewards earned from dungeon exploration. Students and unlicensed hunters received only a tiny fraction of the profits. Unless someone was an A-rank student like Kanan, it was nearly impossible to earn a decent income before graduation. On top of that, every citizen was forced to pay a monthly defense contribution fee to the Hunter Association. In effect, people paid both taxes to the government and additional taxes to the association. For lower and middle-class families, the burden was severe. Hearing this, Akari finally understood why Yamamoto Akari's mother had been forced to work such long hours just to survive. Still, Akari stepped on former bully and told him that financial hardship was no excuse for bullying and extortion. He sincerely apologized. A few days remained before the gate overflowed. Kanan suggested that it was finally time to defeat the gate boss. Akari agreed. She told everyone to rest while she handled the monster herself. The students were thrilled. A student asked if they could observe her battle and use it as a reference for their own growth. Akari had no objection. She stood before the gate boss, a gigantic serpent. The creature lunged at her with its jaws wide open. In the next instant, its head was severed. The battle ended so quickly that the students were left disappointed. As the group headed toward the exit, Akari asked Kanan whether the next training gate had been prepared. Kanan confirmed that she had secured a far more dangerous gate located deep in the mountains, near the site of the recent incident. Privately, Kanan reflected on the terrifying truth. Akari's strength was on an entirely different level. She had become so powerful that even Kanan found her frightening, and despite all of her progress, Kanan still could not imagine defeating her. Suddenly, every phone in the group emitted an emergency alert. Kanan checked the message and immediately went pale. A first-grade gate had appeared in a nearby city. Even worse, only 3 minutes after manifesting, the gate had already entered overflow. Normally, gates took 1 to 2 weeks before overflowing. But in rare cases, monsters poured out within minutes, or even seconds. When that happened, organized countermeasures were nearly impossible. Because this was a first-grade gate in a densely populated urban area, Kanan feared it could become the worst gate disaster Japan had seen in decades. The students shouted that they needed to evacuate immediately, but Akari's face lit up with excitement. She asked only one question. The boss of a first-grade gate must be very strong. Before anyone could stop her, Akari dashed toward the city. At the same time, in his office, Majima Junpei received the same emergency report. Junpei sighed in irritation. Only S-rank hunters could handle first-grade gates, and responding to such disasters was a nuisance. Nearby, a terrified woman tied up and wept as she remained at his mercy. Junpei leaned close to her and asked whether she was grateful that her lifespan had been extended a little longer. Then he turned to his manager with a cruel smile. Now it was time to go and protect the good citizens of the country. Monsters poured into the streets and began attacking civilians without mercy. People ran in terror as destruction spread across the city. Then Akari arrived. With a delighted smile, she threw herself into the chaos. Each monster possessed its own unique strength, and to Akari that made the situation irresistible. She rushed through the city and cut down every creature in her path with overwhelming ease. Watching her from a distance, Kanan admitted that she was no longer sure which was more dangerous, the monsters or Akari herself. The student asked what they were supposed to do. Kanan immediately took command. She instructed everyone to split up and protect civilians according to the emergency procedures they had learned in class. If they followed their training and did what they could, they would still be able to save lives. The students nodded. Meanwhile, the military attempted to stop one of the largest monsters using tanks and heavy artillery. The barrage had no effect. Modern weapons were completely useless against the creature. At that moment, Majima Junpei appeared behind the soldiers. He mocked them for wasting defense funds. The military officer recognized him as a representative of the Hunter Association. Junpei casually remarked that if the government doubled the mandatory monthly defense contributions, he might consider ending the disaster. The officer was outraged. Those contributions already existed specifically to handle situations like this. Junpei merely shrugged and said he could wait until 100,000 people died before taking action. As he spoke, a monster lunged at him from behind. Without even turning around, Junpei destroyed it with one hand. The officer stared in disbelief. A creature immune to tanks had been erased with a single blow. This was the true power of an S-rank hunter. Junpei asked what the military intended to do. After all, protecting civilians was supposedly their job. He added that he personally did not care whether people lived or died. The officer was angry, but with no other options, they were forced to rely on this monstrous man. Elsewhere in the city, a centipede-like monster attacked a mother and her baby. One of the students stepped in and killed it. As he looked at his own hands, he was stunned. Even though it was a relatively weak monster, he had never imagined he would be capable of defeating one so easily. The harsh training Akari had forced him through was clearly working. The grateful mother bowed and thanked him. For a moment, he remembered his own mother. He told the woman to take her daughter and run, and he urged her to treasure her child. Then, he turned to face the approaching monsters with newfound confidence. For the first time, he was using his strength to protect others instead of hurting them. Back on the front lines, Akari stood atop a mountain of monster corpses. She wondered if she had already finished defeating everything nearby. The battle had been entertaining, but not enough to satisfy her. Kanan asked how many monsters she had defeated by herself. Before Akari could answer, a powerful explosion shook the city. Kanan received an urgent message. A squad of hunters was requesting immediate support against the boss monster that had emerged from the gate in District 5. Kanan immediately understood. A first-grade gate of this magnitude could not be cleared without a properly organized high-level force. But before she could say anything else, Akari was already running toward the source of the tremendous magical power. As she crossed the mountains, Akari felt something extraordinary. On the other side was a presence more powerful than anything she had encountered since arriving in this world. When she finally reached the battlefield, she stopped in astonishment. Before her lay the enormous corpse of a gigantic lizard-like monster. Even Akari was momentarily speechless. Akari quietly asked herself, who could possibly have done this? A student reminded her that only the strongest beings in the world, S-rank hunters, were capable of feats like this. She had heard the words S-rank many times since coming to this world, but now, seeing evidence of such overwhelming power with her own eyes, she felt genuine anticipation. Perhaps she had finally found someone worthy of her full attention. Elsewhere, a young man stood atop a building and answered a phone call. He calmly reported that the YB-class boss monster, Diablo Hydra, had been successfully subjugated. On the other end of the call, Majima Junpei clicked his tongue in annoyance. Because of this unnecessary intervention, he had lost the opportunity to extract even more money from the government. The young man apologized and explained that he had simply been passing by and decided to help. Junpei sighed and remarked that Akiyama Shun, you are still a same genius as always. After ending the call, Shun examined the countless monster corpses scattered throughout the city. It was immediately obvious that they had all been defeated in one-sided fashion by an overwhelmingly powerful individual. The first high-grade gate disaster in more than 10 years left many casualties across the city. Even so, the overall damage was kept to a minimum because the S-rank hunters arrived quickly and defeated the boss monster. The public felt relieved. At the same time, they were reminded once again that modern society depended entirely on hunters and the Hunter Association. Meanwhile, Majima Junpei returned to his office in an unusually foul mood. His manager immediately noticed his irritation. Junpei jokingly asked whether he should vent his frustration by beating her. Without hesitation, she removed her jacket and calmly told him to go ahead. Junpei said she had not changed at all. Instead, he asked her to prepare some alcohol. As she opened the liquor cabinet, the manager delivered an important report. The police and the Reize family had begun moving in earnest. According to their intelligence, they had secured a powerful fighter who was not affiliated with the Hunter Association. Junpei raised an eyebrow. He asked whether such a person truly existed. The manager then played a video obtained from a spy. The footage showed Akari in battle. For the first time, Junpei fell silent. Back at the disaster site, military personnel were cleaning up the remains of the monsters. Kanan approached Akari to discuss the rewards. Hunters of A rank and above who responded to the emergency would receive compensation based on the number and type of monsters they defeated. However, monsters that emerged after an overflow did not drop magic stones, with the exception of the boss. As a result, the Hunter Association was forced to pay large sums without receiving any financial return. Akari listened briefly and concluded that there were no more strong enemies to fight. Since the battle was over, she decided it was time to go home. Before she left, her student stepped forward. With a deeply emotional expression, he admitted that for the first time in his life, he felt like a decent person. Saving a mother and her child had changed something inside him. He bowed to Akari and thanked her sincerely. Akari stood in silence, uncertain how to respond to such heartfelt gratitude. Kanan noticed her hesitation and teasingly suggested that she should simply raise her hands and accept the praise. Instead, Akari flicked Kanan on the forehead and knocked her to the ground. Then she turned back to him. Akari acknowledged that he had grown up in a difficult environment and that this likely contributed to his violent behavior. But she made one thing very clear: circumstances alone did not define a person. At his core, he possessed an aggressive and rather trashy personality. He sheepishly admitted that this was true. Akari then gave him the most important lesson of all. People like him should direct their aggression toward protecting others. This world was filled with monsters and corrupt humans who preyed on the innocent. If he truly wanted to become a proper person, he should become the kind of scoundrel who drove out even worse scoundrels. As long as he stayed within the law, his eyes lit up with excitement. He eagerly accepted her words. The rest of the students bowed deeply and pledged to continue following Boss Akari's guidance. Akari quietly admitted that taking occasional detours like this was not such a bad thing. Several days later, the students gathered once again for training. Akari's student clenched his fists with determination and declared that they would work even harder. The others remarked that he had become incredibly motivated. In fact, he now forced everyone to arrive early for extra training sessions. He argued that the stronger they became as hunters, the better their future earnings would be. At that moment, a new voice interrupted them. Majima Junpei had arrived. The students were instantly overwhelmed. They had seen him only on television and the internet. The magical power radiating from his body was so immense that it was difficult to believe he was human. Junpei looked at the group and began speaking casually. In his opinion, the most effective form of harassment was to harm the people someone cared about. The students were confused by his words. Then, without warning, Junpei attacked one of them. His hand pierced straight through the student's body. Junpei calmly explained that this was his way of harassing the Reizai family. The student roared in rage and demanded to know what he was doing. Junpei replied that it was irritating when weak people underestimated him and believed they stood a chance. That was why he despised such behavior. All Akari students immediately activated their magic and charged. Junpei smiled and dismissed them as insignificant. With effortless strikes, he sent every student crashing to the ground. The students lay in agony. Junpei looked down at the fallen students and announced that he would finish them all. Just as he prepared to strike, a voice rang out from behind him. Kanan had arrived. Junpei turned toward his younger sister with a faint smile. It had been a long time. Kanan glared at him with fury and demanded to know what he thought he was doing. Majima Junpei looked at his younger sister with a smile. He asked whether this was really how she intended to greet the brother she had not seen in such a long time. Kanan ignored his mockery and demanded that he explain what he was doing. Junpei answered as casually. He said he was simply punishing those who threatened the order maintained by the Hunter Association. The Reizai family had become troublesome, and this was his way of passing the time. Then he asked whether Kanan wanted to join in. Kanan's expression darkened. She quietly stated that nothing about him had changed. Junpei nodded without shame. He admitted that he had always enjoyed killing people and watching them suffer, and he had always hated anyone who irritated him. Without hesitation, Kanan attacked. She unleashed her lightning magic and shouted that he should die. The attack struck Junpei directly, but it had no effect whatsoever. Junpei smiled. He reminded her of one undeniable fact. He had always been the strongest. Kanan froze in disbelief. An attack that could destroy powerful monsters was completely meaningless to him. Refusing to give up, she activated Lightning Step and circled around him at incredible speed. Junpei laughed. That was the very technique he had taught her. Then, in an instant, he used the same skill. He appeared directly in front of her. Kanan tried to retreat, but Junpei was already behind her. He kicked her with overwhelming force and sent her crashing to the ground. As he walked toward her, he coldly compared her to an inferior copy. She had improved, he admitted, but she was still nothing more than a weaker version of himself. His words were painfully true. Every technique she possessed had originally been modeled after her brother's abilities. For years, he had been the strongest person in her life, and she had unconsciously used him as the standard for her own growth. But things were different now. Since meeting Akari, she had developed new techniques. One of them was alloy bullets, a railgun-like attack that used magnetic force to launch metal projectiles at extreme speed. In theory, it possessed enough penetrating power to break through even an S-rank hunter's defenses. The only problem was creating an opening to fire it. Kanan charged forward and clashed with Junpei directly, but the gap in power was overwhelming. He crushed her assault and knocked her to the ground once again. Junpei chuckled. He could tell she was preparing something. But with such an absurd difference in strength, it made no difference. Just then, something grabbed his foot. One of the students looked up at him with a fearless grin. Junpei told him not to waste his life on meaningless actions, but he refused to let go. He declared that Junpei was the perfect opponent for him. Junpei kicked him away effortlessly, but Kanan smiled. She praised her fellow student's spirit. Using the precious seconds he had bought her, she completed her preparation. Standing behind her brother, Kanan unleashed alloy bullets. The projectiles shot toward Junpei before he had time to react. At that moment, the scene shifted to the Reizai estate. Reizai Xian was reviewing documents as her staff delivered updates. Because the Hunter Association controlled most communications infrastructure, transmitting information securely had become increasingly difficult. Still, the Reizai family had gathered the latest anti-hunter equipment available. They had also assembled as many high-ranking hunters as possible from the police. Xian thanked them for their efforts, but she knew that no amount of preparation could guarantee success. Their opponent was Majima Junpei. The man before her struggled to understand why so much force was necessary to confront a single individual. Xian answered with chilling clarity. An S-rank hunter should not be thought of as one person. Such beings possessed enough power to destroy a nation. If a country attempted to fight them, using only conventional military weapons, it would likely be defeated within a single day. Government buildings, infrastructure, and even nuclear facilities could be seized or destroyed directly. An S-rank hunter was not merely an individual. They were the equivalent of an entire country. Back at the training grounds, Junpei grabbed his defeated sister in one hand. He remarked that she had become somewhat stronger, but even if her talent increased from 100 to 200, the improvement was meaningless against someone whose talent was measured in the hundreds of millions. The student from earlier lay on the ground in shock. Even after all the training Akari had put them through, Kanan still could not make a meaningful dent. Junpei dropped Kanan to the ground and smiled coldly. Then, he looked at the students around him and asked, were they going to continue harassing him? Elsewhere, Akari was walking through the city, talking to herself as she think about shopping show. Even though she had no intention of buying anything, she found herself repeatedly stopping to look at the products. Thanks to that distraction, she arrived late to the training grounds, but the moment she got there, her expression changed completely. Her students had been slaughtered. Bodies were scattered across the ground. The cheerful atmosphere of their training had been replaced by blood and silence. At that moment, Majima Kanan called out to her. Kanan apologized, her voice trembling. She said that even though she had been there, she could not stop him. Akari immediately understood. Kanan was talking about her brother. Kanan lowered her head and admitted that despite all the training Akari had given her, she had still failed. Nearby, one of the students was barely alive. His injuries were so severe that anyone could see he was standing at death's door. Even so, he reached out to Akari and apologized. Akari looked at him and quietly thought to herself that he was still breathing. Then she spoke in an unusually solemn tone. She said that she was sorry. Her magic could destroy countless enemies, but it could not heal others. With trembling hands, the dying student held out an envelope. Inside was 3 million yen. The students had earned the money by taking real quests outside of training and by working part-time jobs. The boy smiled weakly and said he was glad he had been able to deliver it to her. That was all he wanted. Moments later, he took his final breath. Akari stood in silence. Then she said that she would not thank him. Compared to what they had done, This amount was only a pittance. For perhaps the first time since arriving in this world, Akari was truly enraged. She immediately called Reizi House. Akari apologized, but said she no longer felt like waiting for the planned operation. She was going to beat up Majima Junpei right now. Sheen would simply have to clean up the aftermath. Then Akari ended the call. Turning to Kanan, she asked if she could still move. If so, she was to guide her directly to her brother's headquarters. As they traveled toward the Japan Hunter Association building, Kanan remarked that Akari was surprisingly humane. Akari instantly snapped at her and threatened to finish her off if she continued talking. Kanan asked whether she was really that angry. Akari answered without hesitation, yes, very much so. Then she demanded Junpei's direct contact information. Inside the Hunter Association headquarters, Majima Junpei returned to his office. His manager welcomed him. Junpei asked for a change of clothes because his shirt had been slightly torn. The manager remarked that it was difficult to imagine anyone capable of even scratching him. At that moment, Junpei received a call from an unknown number. When he answered, Akari introduced herself. She politely stated that his harassment had been very entertaining. Junpei laughed and asked whether she had enjoyed it. If that was the case, he said, he would begin using the people around her to provide even more amusement. Akari calmly thanked him for the offer. Then she informed him that she was coming to beat him up. He should prepare himself. Without waiting for a reply, she hung up. Junpei smiled. He instructed his manager to alert security. An interesting guest would be arriving shortly, and he wanted to welcome her properly. Soon, Akari and Kanan stood before the towering Hunter Association headquarters. Two security hunters blocked their path. They announced that the building was on emergency alert and that no one was allowed to enter. Kanan immediately recognized how dangerous they were. These were not ordinary guards. Both were elite B-rank hunters with exceptional combat abilities. Akari simply told them to move. Before they could respond, she struck them and hurled their bodies straight through the reinforced glass entrance. The massive bulletproof windows shattered instantly. Kanan stared in disbelief. That glass was specially designed to withstand powerful attacks. Akari casually remarked that it was fortunate the guards were stronger than average humans. As Akari stepped into the building, dozens of hunters surrounded her. Kanan quickly assessed the situation. Most of them were B rank or higher. Several A rank hunters were also present. Akari looked around at the assembled force and sighed. This was not the warm welcome she had expected. She had heard that Japan was a country known for hospitality. If this was how guests were treated now, then perhaps that tradition had truly been lost. Akari shook her head in disappointment. One of the hunters shouted a single command, attack. In the next instant, every hunter in the building charged at the Demon King. Inside a hospital room, a severely injured hunter lay on a bed, covered in bandages. This was Suzuki Eric, an A-rank hunter and the vice captain of the security force at Hunter Association headquarters. As investigators questioned him, Eric described the terrifying scene. He explained that he had been one of the first hunters to rush in and confront Akari. Alongside him were several of the association's strongest A-rank hunters, including Uramura Kanji, Yu Yi, and Uzuki Kenya. And yet, according to Eric, all of them were blown away by a single kick. Back at headquarters, Akari looked at the fallen hunters and remarked that kicking them was far more satisfying than dealing with ordinary weaklings. The remaining security forces quickly regrouped. Their commander, Hirokawa Shinji, an A-rank hunter, shouted orders to his men. He warned them to treat Akari as if they were facing a ZB-class disaster monster. Support teams immediately began casting debuff and restraint magic. A strange blue aura surrounded Akari as multiple spells attempted to weaken her. Hirokawa ordered everyone to increase their output. Wind and fire attribute users unleashed long-range attacks from every direction. Soon, Akari was completely encircled by flames. Akari smiled with delight. A coordinated group battle like this brought back memories. She remembered a time when an entire small country had united to challenge her in her previous world. It had been a long time since she had experienced something so nostalgic. To the hunter's horror, the flames had no effect whatsoever. Akari calmly surrounded herself with a blue barrier that blocked every attack. The hunters were stunned. More than 10 simultaneous spells, combined with numerous debuffs, should have inflicted serious damage even on a ZB-class monster. Hirokawa tried to steady his troops. There were more than 50 hunters in the room. Surely they still had the advantage in numbers. Before he could finish, Akari appeared behind him. She gently pointed out that he misunderstood the nature of battle. A force of 1,000 people did not necessarily function as 1,000 effective fighters. At that moment, Hirokawa launched an arrow toward her. Akari caught it effortlessly with one hand and snapped it in two. Then she explained that most people feared death and cherished their own lives above all else. The commander began to tremble. Akari charged forward. With a single punch and kick, she sent numerous hunters flying through the air. The security force collapsed one after another. One terrified hunter admitted that they had no chance of defeating this monster. As panic spread, some began trying to flee. Akari seized two of them and continued her lesson. Not everyone possessed the conviction required to defeat the enemy standing before them. Watching from behind, Kanan could only shake her head. As usual, Akari's strength bordered on nonsense. Standing before the broken commander, Akari calmly explained that when 10 to 20% of a group suffered casualties, most organizations disintegrated from fear. What truly mattered in battle was an absolute determination to win at any cost. Did they possess that kind of will? Hirokawa was too terrified to answer. At that moment, a streak of electrical energy shot toward Akari. She dodged effortlessly and turned to face the newcomer. Majima Junpei had finally entered the battlefield. Junpei introduced himself and remarked that it seemed his gift had been well received. The battered commander thanked Junpei for saving them. Junpei glanced at him and coldly stated that this failure was the commander's responsibility. He grabbed Hirokawa by the neck. Hirokawa desperately begged for forgiveness, explaining that Akari was far stronger than expected. Junpei dismissed the excuse. Without hesitation, he snapped his neck. The commander died instantly. Junpei casually remarked that he had simply felt like killing someone. He always found a reason when he wanted to indulge himself. Akari looked at him and called him an idiot. To her, human beings represented potential. The proper approach was to make the most of that potential and hope for future growth. Junpei scoffed. Humans were disposable creatures. No matter how many were killed, more would always appear. The two monsters stood facing one another, both smiling. Behind them, Kanan felt her heart race. At last, the battle between Japan's strongest S-rank hunter and the demon king from another world was about to begin. But before the clash could start, Kanan sensed danger. She barely dodged a steel rod fired toward her. Standing before her was Junpei's secretary. Although not officially an S-rank hunter, she was regarded as one of the strongest A-rank hunters in the country. The secretary coldly criticized Kanan for siding with a rebel against the Majima family. Kanan gritted her teeth. She was already badly injured and could barely move. Even so, she knew she had no choice. Akari and Majima Junpei stood face to face. Both released their overwhelming magical power. Without another word, they charged at each other. Their attacks collided head-on and exploded, blasting a hole through the ceiling. For the first time in a long while, Akari's face lit up with genuine excitement. Junpei wore the same expression, still locked in combat. They shot upward through the same hole, trading blows as they went. Watching from below, Kanan realized she had to be careful not to get caught in the battle. But before she could focus on Akari's fight, several metal spears flew toward her. Kanan immediately activated Lightning Step and dodged every projectile. The secretary-manager, Mishima Fumiko, calmly remarked that compared to Majima Junpei, she was nothing more than dust. However, she was still more than enough to deal with Kanan. Kanan knew exactly who she was facing. Fumiko belonged to a branch family of the Majima clan. Despite not being an S-rank hunter, she was widely regarded as the strongest A-rank hunter in Japan and possessed power close to S-rank. There was nothing lacking in her as an opponent. Kanan gripped an alloy bullet in her hand and fired it toward Fumiko. The projectile shot forward at incredible speed. Fumiko was impressed. The bullet stopped just before her eye. She noted that Kanan had clearly continued developing her lightning-based abilities. What surprised her even more was that Kanan had also begun using mineral manipulation, the very earth-type technique that Fumiko herself specialized in. Kanan explained that she had simply been refining what she was already capable of. Fumiko said she would return the attack. Using her own superior magnetic control, she reversed the bullet and sent it flying back at Kanan. Kanan attempted to stop it, but immediately realized that Fumiko's power far exceeded her own. She barely managed to alter its trajectory. The bullet struck the ground with enough force to crack the concrete. Then Fumiko tapped the floor with her foot and activated another spell. Black Dragon. From the ground rose an enormous dragon made entirely of iron sand. The creature lunged at Kanan. Kanan used all of her power to resist, but the dragon overwhelmed her and hurled her into the wall. Fumiko looked at her with interest. She had now confirmed Kanan's method. By applying electricity to minerals, Kanan was generating magnetism and creating entirely new forms of combat. It was a clever development. Even so, the difference in raw ability remained overwhelming. Kanan forced herself to stand. As expected, she was facing the strongest A-rank hunter in the country. Then Fumiko asked whether Kanan still intended to defeat her brother, the man responsible for the deaths of her parents. To Fumiko, such an ambition was foolish. Kanan glared at her and asked a question of her own. With such extraordinary talent, why devote her life to serving a madman like Majima Junpei? If she went overseas, she could easily work under respectable S-rank hunters, and no matter how loyal she was, Junpei could kill her on a whim. Fumiko fell silent for a moment. Then she answered with complete sincerity. That was exactly what she wanted. Kanan stared at her in disbelief. Fumiko continued, her face flushed with excitement. She wanted Junpei to kill her slowly and cruelly. She wanted to be tormented and humiliated. If possible, she even wanted him to eat her flesh. She confessed that she had been intensely jealous of the woman Junpei had tortured a few days earlier. Kanan could only stare in horror. What kind of pervert was this woman? Fumiko leaned forward and asked whether Kanan understood this feeling. Kanan rejected the idea entirely. No matter how unusual Fumiko's desires were, one fact remained unchanged. Her opponent was overwhelmingly powerful. Kanan tightened her fist. There was only one option left. It seemed she would have to use that technique. Meanwhile, the battle between Akari and Majima Junpei grew even more intense. Junpei charged forward and threw a devastating punch. Akari dodged effortlessly, but the force of the attack alone was enough to crack the entire ground beneath them. Akari smiled with excitement. She cast a powerful spell. Fireball, level 4. A series of enormous fire spheres materialized behind her and launched toward Junpei. Junpei responded instantly. Using his own magic, he created multiple thunderballs and fired them at Akari. The two spells collided in midair. A massive explosion tore through the Hunter Association headquarters, causing even greater destruction throughout the building. Akari watched the blast with shining eyes. S-rank hunters truly were extraordinary. Then she spoke the words she had longed to say for 10,000 years. Please defeat me. Who on the other side of the battlefield, Kanan was still facing Mashima Fumiko. Fumiko looked at her with disappointment. She told Kanan that all of her efforts had been wasted. Kanan remained silent. Fumiko continued. Since Kanan could not even kill her instantly, what hope did she have of defeating Majima Junpei? A-rank hunters and S-rank hunters were fundamentally different beings. S-rank hunters were transcendent humans, individuals born with extraordinary gifts far beyond ordinary talent. Kanan might desire revenge, but there were some things in life that could never be achieved. But Kanan smiled. She calmly replied that Akari had taught her something very different. Akari would never tell her to surrender. Instead, she would demand that she struggle to the very end without giving up, and that was exactly what Kanan intended to do. Then Kanan released an immense surge of electrical energy from her body. Fumiko was shocked. Electricity condensed and took shape at her back. Fumiko reacted with blocking with several metal beams. Then Kanan lifts her finger to attack. A concentrated beam of electricity shot from Kanan's fingertip, piercing through the blocks and forcing Fumiko to dodge. Although she avoided a direct hit, the beam sliced across her face. Using that brief opening, Kanan closed the distance. Fumiko immediately reacted with summoning an iron sand barrier to block the attack, but Kanan's power tore straight through it. For the first time, Fumiko was genuinely shaken. Was she actually losing in terms of raw output? No. More importantly, the quality of Kanan's electricity felt eerily similar to Majima Junpei's. When Fumiko demanded an explanation, Kanan revealed the truth. She had used the byproduct of a secret project known as the Transcendent Mass Production Plan. Years ago, governments around the world had attempted to artificially create more S-rank hunters. Since individuals of that caliber were both rare and immensely valuable, every nation sought ways to mass-produce them. Most of these experiments ended in total failure. One of the most extreme approaches involved transplanting cells from existing S-rank hunters into human subjects. Naturally, cells from Majima Junpei, the strongest S-rank hunter in Japan, were among those used. With the influence of the Majima family, obtaining his genetic material had been relatively easy. However, the experiments were catastrophic. The human body could not withstand the overwhelming power of an S-rank hunter. More than half of the test subjects died. Fumiko stared at Kanan in disbelief and called her insane. Kanan's expression hardened. Hearing those words from someone like Fumiko was deeply ironic. Kanan launched herself forward. In an instant, she closed the distance between them. Majima Kanan's attack struck Mishima Fumiko with overwhelming force. The impact was so powerful that Fumiko could barely remain standing. Refusing to surrender, she launched several metal beams toward Kanan. Kanan calmly stopped every projectile in midair. Then she sent them all back at once. The metal rods changed direction and shot toward Fumiko at tremendous speed. At the last possible moment, Fumiko narrowly dodged. As she regained her balance, she could not hide her shock. Even Kanan's mineral manipulation had surpassed her own abilities. Kanan might not officially be an S-rank hunter, but there was no doubt that she had already crossed the boundaries of an A rank. Kanan admitted that she did not know whether it was because of their blood relationship or because she was already a highly trained A-rank hunter. But infuriatingly, the transplanted power suited her body extremely well. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth as she spoke. Fumiko looked at her with a strange expression. She said she was astonished that Kanan had gone this far. Kanan replied that she understood the risks perfectly, but Fumiko clarified that she was not referring to the danger. What truly surprised her was Kanan's willingness to accept the power of the very person she hated most, the same man she sought to destroy. For a moment, Kanan fell silent. Then she answered honestly. Yes, the thought disgusted her, but if taking her brother's power made her stronger, she would endure it. That was the determination required to make the impossible possible. Fumiko slowly rose to her feet. She acknowledged Kanan's resolve, but she too had a dream she refused to abandon. She could not die until Majima Junpei personally killed her. A massive black dragon of iron sand materialized behind her. Fumiko declared that she would continue struggling until that day came. In response, Kanan summoned her electric Ghidorah. A gigantic three-headed serpent appeared and roared. The two colossal constructs charged at one another. When they collided, a tremendous explosion shook the entire building. The black dragon shattered, and Fumiko collapsed to the ground. Kanan walked toward her defeated opponent. Fumiko smiled weakly and remarked that if she had to be killed by this power, it would not be such a bad end. Kanan kicked her in the face. She had no intention of killing someone against whom she held no personal grudge. Looking upward, Kanan declared that there was only one person she truly wanted to kill, Majima Junpei. Above, Akari and Majima Junpei continued their extraordinary battle. The two exchanged blows with delighted expressions. Each kick and punch generated devastating shockwaves, yet neither showed any sign of weakening. Junpei smirked and asked whether this was truly the full extent of the Rize family's secret weapon. Akari was briefly surprised. Then her smile widened into a more dangerous expression. If Junpei wished to test her limits, she was more than happy to oblige. Akari announced that she would increase her output to 50%. She launched forward and struck Junpei, who barely managed to block the blow. The force drove him backward. Without pause, Akari raised her power to 70%, appearing behind him. She delivered a crushing kick that sent him soaring through the air. Akari's excitement grew even stronger. She praised him for maintaining his human form despite enduring such punishment. Then she teleported above him, 90%. With that declaration, she prepared a devastating punch. Junpei gathered his own power and countered with a punch of his own. Their fists collided in a cataclysmic explosion, but Akari's strength proved superior. Junpei was blasted through multiple walls before crashing to the ground. Akari landed in front of him. She called him magnificent. It had been 500 years since she had needed to exert herself to this degree. Then she asked the question she had been waiting to ask. Would he stand up again? Junpei cracked his neck and rose to his feet. He remarked that the battle was unfolding exactly as he had predicted after watching the footage. Akari was confused. Then Junpei delivered a shocking statement. He told her that she was weaker than he was. At that moment, he released immense power from his body. The strongest hunter in Japan was finally revealing his true power.